Oh, I'm so excited for today's office hours because we're going to talk all about the oral microbiome and how that connects to the brain and to the gut. And so I know a lot of you have somewhere in your heart a family history of Alzheimer's, or somewhere in your heart that you're wanting to prevent Alzheimer's, or maybe a loved one that you're wanting to decrease their symptoms. And so today we're going to start with that, and then we'll open it up for questions. I did receive a lot of great questions from you all, so I'm excited to answer those at the end. All right, so today we're talking about a specific bacteria called Porphyromonas gingivalis. It's affectionately called P. gingivalis. Oh, this is a bacteria that lives in the oral microbiome, but it's shown a lot in the science to have a whole body effect. And it's especially linked to Alzheimer's and inflammatory bowel disease. Inflammatory bowel disease is Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. Now, P. gingivalis is special because it has three different ways that it acts differently than other bacteria. It's inflammation, bacterial translocation, so it moves from the mouth all the way through the digestive system and in the bloodstream. And then the third piece is it creates a toxin called gingipans. So we'll go into all of these pieces and what we can do about it. But P. gingivalis is a strictly anaerobic bacteria. So this means it doesn't need air to live on, and it actually thrives below the gum line. So if we're looking at this picture here, we've got the tooth, we've got the gums. This is the healthy gums over here. But then the inflamed gums can look like this, more redness, more swelling. But then there can be these pockets. And this is where P. gingivalis lives. It's where it thrives, is really deep in the gum line and deep in those periodontal pockets. A lot of other bacteria in the mouth eat sugars. So many people in the dental and oral hygiene space say, decrease your sugar. That's going to be one of the best things to prevent cavities. And that's true, but P. gingivalis does not eat sugar. So it instead feeds on proteins and peptides and iron from the blood and inflamed tissue. And that's where it gets really interesting, because P. gingivalis creates inflammation in the mouth. That inflammation is what produces the toxins, the gingipans. And then those tissues with the inflammation, they create blood, they create proteins, they create iron. And so the P. gingivalis is making its own food, which I'll talk about more in a moment. But P. gingivalis is a sneaky one because it hides so deep in the gums, and the immune system really doesn't detect it as well, which is why it can be so there with the whole systemic effect on the gut and the brain. So how this especially affects the brain, and especially what we're seeing in Alzheimer's, is the bacteria enters in the mouth. It starts in the mouth, but it enters via the bloodstream because it's deep in those periodontal pockets, so the deep gum pockets. So if ever you get bleeding when you're flossing or bleeding when you're brushing your teeth, that's where it gets dangerous. This P. gingivalis can get into the bloodstream from there. And then it releases its gingipans. And what we're seeing when people pass from Alzheimer's, we do an autopsy, we're seeing high concentrations of the gingipans in the brains. So we're seeing that there's that correlation right there of the P. gingivalis causing the gingipans, and we're seeing that in higher concentrations in people with Alzheimer's. We also know that this gingipan toxin breaks down tau proteins. So for those of you that know about the Alzheimer's piece, there's tau proteins in the brain, and there's amyloid beta plaque formations. Now those toxins, the gingipans, breaks down the tau proteins, and it makes those amyloid plaque formations more plethoric. Then the last piece is the part that really hits it in the heart, where we're seeing the cognitive loss, the cognitive decline, worsening memory and cognition. And so this all can be related back to the P. gingivalis. Okay, now with the gut, there's always this gut-brain connection. And P. gingivalis is strong. It is strong enough that it survives all of the enzymes in the mouth, the saliva. It even survives the stomach acid. So it makes it all the way to the lower GI tract, into the intestines. And once it gets there, it reduces the tight junction proteins. So those tight junctions that make the intestines so healthy and so strong, it creates space there. And that's where we get that term leaky gut. So it increases the permeability in the gut lining. So that's where we see this immune trigger start to happen, because thus far the immune system hasn't been aware of its presence. It's able to evade until it gets to the intestines. But when it's in the intestines, we get these pro-inflammatory Th17 cells, which usually respond to bacteria, that makes colitis worse, especially ulcerative colitis. So this is that feedback loop that I wanted to come back to about why P. gingivalis is uniquely dangerous. It makes its own food supply. So when it releases its toxins, its gingipans, that irritates the tissue and it damages the gums. That inflammation is where the P. gingivalis starts to eat. It eats off of the blood and the proteins and peptides and iron of the food and the inflammatory tissue that it makes. So it's able to rapidly reproduce once it's in the mouth. So more bacteria equals more toxins equals more inflammation. So I want us to be able to do something about that. One of the things that we can start to look at, and this is why I'm so excited for our holistic dentist to come and talk with us, but there is some perfect storms that can happen in the mouth for P. gingivalis to, one, be there, period, but then two, be able to overgrow. When there's plaque formation, that creates a perfect anaerobic condition for P. gingivalis to thrive. So there's no air, and the biofilms are so thick that the P. gingivalis can just go to town because there's not much oxygen below the gum line anyways. So if there's plaque on top of the gum line, even more environment for P. gingivalis to thrive. Those deep pockets, deep periodontal pockets, that's where inflammation happens and creates another dark anaerobic space. And then the pH balance is interesting. So we want to make sure that we have a healthy pH so that the good bacteria can thrive in the mouth and the bad bacteria can't thrive. Because the bacteria, P. gingivalis, digests amino acids, then it releases ammonia, that changes the pH. So in terms of prevention, there's some things that we can do. 4 things for today, and then we'll get to learn more in a couple of weeks. One of the things to know is because of that immune system evasion, we have to be really mindful of getting deep into the oral spaces when we can. So if you can do flossing for sure, but water picking, making sure that things are getting inside that tissue and making sure, of course, that you're getting your regular cleanings, because that can help just to clear it out. Smoking is also something that when you don't smoke, your oral microbiome is, of course, much healthier. But a big reason for that is because the tobacco reduces oxygen. So that creates an environment where P. gingivalis loves to thrive. Diabetes, which I think almost all of this, that diabetes is very much linked to Alzheimer's. But it's interesting that we can see this correlation through the oral microbiome too. So we know that uncontrolled blood sugars can alter the inflammation response. They can also alter the oral microbiome and the gum composition. But then we're seeing that when there's uncontrolled blood sugar, that can lead to cognitive decline as well. And then chronic stress. So high cortisol all the time also suppresses the immune response. So the things that we just did in summer camp, the pieces that are part of your regular routine, this is long-term medicine. So big takeaways. And then there were some really great questions I want to address here too of things that we can do now. But the big takeaway is that oral health is whole body health. So we can start the microbiome being healthy. There is a varying risk with the gingipans shown to be accelerated tau protein and amyloid plaque formation, then also the linking to Alzheimer's. The P. gingivalis is related to IBD with that Th17 inflammation. And the P. gingivalis creates its own food supply, which is making early interventions so critical to let's make sure that you don't have the P. gingivalis, you don't have it to be overgrown. We can do this by daily brushing, daily flossing, professional dental care. And then some things that we can do, all of us today, there are oral microbiome tricks that we can do or support that we can do at home. There was a great question about what are some healthy chewing gums that we can use. And so I would love to talk about that. But then there also is a test that you can do on your oral microbiome health now. I looked it up just this morning to see there is one on FullScript that happy to order for anybody that wants it, is a saliva test where it will look at all of your microbes, P. gingivalis included, and it will do a pH check to see how are things. Is there something specific that we need to address here? So the question about the chewing gums, the question was, what about chemicals in chewing gum? Is there anything minty, fresh chewing gum that doesn't upset the mouth's microbiome? And this will relate back to the question about mouthwash too, which was also very good. A lot of chewing gums have a ton of chemicals in them. It's not very good for the overall health. There's aspartame, it can cause anxiety. There's some obesogens in chewing gums, and it's just not very good for the nervous system either. However, there are two chewing gums that I found in my researching that are really cool in their technology. And they work by increasing nitric oxide in the mouth. So it has a nice effect on the nervous system, but then it also has a nice effect on the pH. Now, here is one, I just dropped it in the chat, of a nitric gum. And then this one is also, it's by Designs for Health. It's a microbiome gum specifically. And this one, the second one, is on Fullscript. So I put the Amazon link in here, but you might be able to get it cheaper on Fullscript because it's by Designs for Health and we give you that discount. So those are very cool things that you can do if you are wanting to have extra support for your oral microbiome. And the question about mouthwash, I love this question. It says, my neurologist, who does a lot of research on Alzheimer's, asked me if I use mouthwash. I told him no. And he said, don't use it, but it didn't ask him why. I'm wondering, does mouthwash kill what's good for the mouth's microbiome? Short answer is yes. A lot of mouthwashes contain alcohol, kills everything. So it will kill the good bugs. It will kill the bad bugs too, but it changes the pH so that the good bugs can't thrive and it can't keep that nice balance. Oh, there are some, not a ton, but there are some brands of mouthwash that don't have that sterilizing effect and it will help the good bugs thrive and kill off the bad bugs. TheraBreath is one that's quite common. It's an alcohol-free mouthwash approved by my holistic dentist. But I also think that that's going to be a great question to ask him of, are there specific mouthwash brands that are good for oral microbiome health that don't have the negative side effects? So I hope this is helpful. I know that was a ton of sciencey information. I think the best action items that we can do right now are test your own oral microbiome to see how are things going, and then have a unique dental care routine that fits your health profile and your goals. If you already have P. gingivalis in the mouth, then doing as much as you can to decrease it. And then if you don't have P. gingivalis in the mouth, but you want to prevent it, having a preventative routine to keep that at bay as well.